we're down to the last Dragon God. But I don't think that that means that we're down to the last arc. If I had to guess, just based off of what Mishima said, that we are gonna be around halfway with. He said it somewhere around like midway of like the Golden Owl arc, so probably somewhere around like realistically when he was writing it, kind of like that, like fair enough into entry. So around like if I had to guess 100 to maybe like 120 chapters less. So let's just say somewhere between 30 to 40 chapters in split section of arcs to kind of match what we've been doing in 100 Years Quest. I think logically that rounds out to about 3 arcs left in the series at the very least, depending on what Mishima wants to do. If he has any other ideas, if plans change, or if he wants to set up to do the next gen series like he's talked about a little bit, just depending on what fans want. At the moment, though, we'll talk just about how the next 3 sections could go. Not in just kind of guessing arcs like, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen for this. I know there's still the potential for LF Seria, but I think that if we're going to have an idea in theory 3 more arcs, I believe that we're going to have some form of time skip. Either one more arc, like if there's 2 arcs left, one after this next one, or before the final one. And the reason I think that is there's still a chunk that each of the characters really need to step up into before I think they're ready for those further sections of 100 Years Quest and what's to come. And when you look at that, I think that, like, for instance, Urza needs to be straight up more powerful than someone like Misaki. I know that she won the fight, but it was just because of a powered up enough attack that was able to take advantage of Misaki being completely in shock of Urza's magic overtaking her dimension and then the attack landing. And that can happen. You can have a character who is overall more powerful, but a single attack can be strong enough to take him down, just having like an all-in move that is able to overcome them. Because at that point, it's like you can have overall stronger and then one technique stronger, but it's like if that one technique misses, then you're going to run to a rough section of what characters are going to be, generally dealing with. And it's kind of like how if you compared where Natsu was in Alvarez to Guildarts was overall more powerful for sure, but if you looked at Natsu with Dragon Force, there was no way that Guildarts would really be able to contend with Natsu at that time period of while he's in Dragon Force. But Dragon Force comes with a very high magic requirement and burns him down to pretty much nothing once he's finished using it. So when you look at stuff like that, and obviously I think Gray needs to be, I still personally, I think by end of series, Gray should be stronger than Urza. I know Urza has a lot more general hype and placement in the series, but I think just for Gray's placement, he should be a fair, like maybe not like twice her strength, but strong enough to where it really came down to it all out, not talking about like, how he views Urza. I think that he should be stronger than her in that kind of end area. And the most important one being Natsu, because out of everyone, he's the only one that logically should be 1v1ing a Dragon God by the time the 100 Years Quest ends, because Ignia wants to have that 1v1 fight, and it makes sense for the main character to end up as relatively the strongest person by the end of the general story. So when we're looking at all this, I believe that there will be some form of another time skip. And where I'm got my fingers crossed, just assuming that Ignia is going to be the end of 100 Years Quest villain, my personal hopes are we get this next arc to be Ignia focused. There's an arc after that, maybe that's the LF Seria sus revealed arc, and then after that we get an Ignia conclusion. Because I'd really like, this is my fan hopes for going into an Ignia centered arc, is that we get more characters like Ignia Squad introduced. We see who exactly is going to be like the adversary equivalent to each member of the main cast. And the main cast takes a lot of L's, but they're more of kind of like that, oh yeah, we lost this round, but then there's something in between. And then once we get to that final arc, they're actually able to defeat them. So they have some form of goal to overtake, whether it be like a hard L or if it's like an interrupted fight. But I would really like it, most certainly to have characters to where they're like, yeah, we can't beat them yet, but we have a way to kind of figure out how we're going to overcome them. Just because I think that would be really fun going into the idea of the final arc of 100 Years Quest to see exactly what is their obstacle. Like everybody have like a character that they have a personal grudge against, that they're like, yeah, I gotta be able to defeat this guy. This is the problem that I ran into last time. I have to figure out how to get past that issue. So going into all that, the question for me is, what exactly is each character logically would be their big end of series training idea? For Natsu, I feel like for Natsu, his should be straightforward. He needs to train with somebody of a similar stature of power as him, not just in terms of strength, but in terms of somebody who's using similar based abilities. Another example, because there's a just general idea of like, you can train, but it's not going to give the same amount of effectiveness. I'll kind of come back to this in a second, because I feel like Natsu's is one I'd like to kind of finish with. I think the easiest one probably is Lucy. I think Lucy should be either training with Anna or maybe with the Celestial Spirit King. There should be something just straightforward with her where she is going to just look at her magic and figure out, how can I increase the quantity of my magic overall, what I could be doing to improve upon where I'm at right now, and what is there left for me to learn. Because Lucy still has multiple Stardust mixes, I believe, in the wings. I mean, just in theory, she should be able to mix any of them, and then there's the idea of, well, if she can mix 2, is there the possibility of her mixing 3 or 4? I would imagine after a point, she would just go for all at once, or get like the Celestial Spirit King Stardust, like a lot of fans have their fingers crossed on. But my belief is Lucy should have some setup, a reason to go to Stellar Memory again, and to maybe, if not Anna, learn about the strongest Celestial Spirit Wizard ever, and to figure out what exactly they were capable of, what spells they had. Maybe she finds out a Celestial Spirit magic that has only been harnessed once, and it's like, oh yeah, this was something that either the greatest Celestial Spirit Wizard ever could do, or it took 100 Celestial Spirit Wizards to make. Because imagine, it'd be really cool if it's like Lucy with all the keys active and she uses Gemini and then a bunch of other ones, and she's able to be like, oh yeah, for each star I see in the sky, I can create a clone. And she just makes a bunch of her. Each of them are doing like a chant, so she can pretty much do this mega like artillery Celestial Spirit magic by herself, just by being smart and combining her powers into doing this strategized way to make up the means of the requirements for it. I think that would be really cool, because I like that once we were introduced with Stardress, it was compared somewhat to Requip, but it's very different when you think about it from a mechanical standpoint. Because when Urza's doing Requip, she's putting on a new armor or getting a new weapon, and she's augmenting her offense or defense, or sometimes a ability trait onto herself that is with that weapon. The thing though with Lucy is gaining the aspects of the key itself. So when she intakes Sagittarius, for example, even though Lucy has no archery skills, she is instantly a master archer while equipping it, because she is having all the skills and abilities that Sagittarius has. So it's almost like a automatic application of skills and traits, rather. And it's something that Lucy has shown that she can continuously advance through being tactical, being smart, and figuring out, okay, if I combine these two, why is it more beneficial than combining these two? Whereas like Urza combining, it's like, oh, well, I can combine a fire sword and maybe like a earth armor and get a lava sword or something. Hers are very more straightforward. Like Urza has always had more straightforward types of armors and weapons. It's just she has more general options. They're just more straightforward in how they're going to be generated and produced. And so something like that for Lucy, I think, would be great. For Wendy, I honestly would like to see her maybe just go to some form of enchanting clan, or maybe an academy, society. He's like, I don't think hers needs to be as in like already structured depth of, yeah, we would love to see just some kind of expanse on celestial spirit magic through something, X, Y, and Z we already know exists. Whereas Wendy's, I think, could be just general lore building. Like, oh, yeah, the last because imagine online, it's like, oh, the last person that we saw with this kind of capability was that Irene woman. And then, bam, you have like a, cool callback. It shows Wendy's potential. And it kind of just gives you like a cool round out of her versus Irene in how they advanced and how exactly like their differing paths were, as well as like her help from Irene itself. Gray Gray is one that I really am hoping more so than Lucy's in theory of getting explanation to the origins of his magic. Like celestial spirit magic would be really cool to see like just some general lore aspects of it, but we don't really have anything for god slaying and devil slaying. And with devil slaying more so because we also don't even really have anything outside of ice devil slaying. I always had an idea of like if they would do like a Strauss sibling spinoff, you could easily have some cool devil slayer as the villain and have them be after Mira Jane and maybe like explain, oh well, devil slaying came from like this family who created it to get rid of demons and devils, and some guy named Silver at one point came and learned it, and that's how that kind of expanded there. It's like, oh well, we'll take in anybody if they have a general hatred towards demons and devils. And you can kind of like explore the idea of like, well, it comes down to like choice, kind of like with dragons, and it's more about the user and not like the race itself. You can do some neat stuff like that. Either way, it'd be really cool to see if Gray, for instance, and this is just an idea that I had, if he went and talked to Invil, maybe busted Invil out of prison, because Invil knew somewhat of devil slaying magic, and maybe you could have him just kind of explain what he knows. Maybe he knows of an ice devil somewhere out in the world, a natural demon, non-nefarious, and he's like, oh well, this is an ancient being that though there are... my dog sees a cat. I was like, oh, there are dragons and devils and gods. It's like some of them fell. Like, I think it'd be cool if, similar to how like dragons works, obviously like you'd want to have a slayer magic to combat devils, but with devils there's less of value to them, whereas dragons, generally a dragon is going to be extremely powerful and difficult no matter how the dragon is, because of their pretty much immunity to magic, their high physical stats, their racial abilities, and the fact they're generally much older than any human that goes after them. But with devils and demons, I think it'd be cool for the natural ones to be way more weak ones, but they're way more dangerous in scale. Like kind of like how like Black Clover has demons and devils, but it's like there's like ranks and there's just massive gaps between them. But you could be like, oh well, most of the demons and devils have been killed out, like the natural ones. Not talking about like the Galoon Island ones, but like ones of actual threat. And so it's like, oh well, there used to be one of like major elements, and the one of ice is one of the only ones that was never defeated, and we don't even know whether or not it's still alive, but we know where it is, or like some form of like cool mysterious lore aspect, and Gray has to go find and pretty much fight one to the death. And I think that would be a really cool callback to Gray's start with Deliora. It's like his journey began through being overwhelmed by a demon, and his journey starts to kind of take not a close, but like where he kind of ends up reaching like his general peak and gets to that like big step of his capabilities after being able to vanquish a demon of massive like lore and general fear, to where maybe you have like an area that's always been frozen, like, oh, this used to be a normal land and it used to be lush and green, and then this devil moved into the mountains, and since then it's been an Arctic tundra, and you have Gray there to go kind of free them from their clutches. I think that would be really cool. Just have little bit of world building, really cool thing for him, nice close out and call back to his lore, and just in general I think that'd be really fun. Urza, Urza's, I think, it could vary the most out of all of them, because Urza could just be like training with Jalal. She could do something like maybe going to find out more about her mother, and then like that leads to her maybe her running into somebody that like is from their old Dragunov kingdom. Ultimately, I think Urza's comes down to the age old. Like, I think Urza's in general instruction, or general structure can vary the most, but I think hers should have the most, like, kind of molded, like, hard step conclusion, to where she gets a custom armor and sword that is made for her with very cool like lore and reasoning as to where like the metal's from, the design, and why it is, and the name. Because I know it's tropey, but I think that is the coolest thing for swords characters and characters that wield weapons, is like they eventually get one that is made for them, designed for them, and it's something that they are able to wield in accumulation of their journey and the events that led them to that point. uh Lastly, because as much as I want to talk about Jalal, it's like I can't say for sure Jalal's in the main cast, and I still think logically for him we can get him something cool like fifth generation Dragon Slayer. Actually, see somebody become a fifth gen, and then give him a cool callback to the Tower of Heaven when Natsu ate like a substance to defeat him. He ends up eating like dragon meat to get strong enough maybe to protect Urza. Again, nice flip and mirror onto his original arc when Natsu did it in order to defeat Jalal and protect Urza. But with Natsu's needs to be, I think, very set personally to him, or it's just at most beneficial. It's training, but in a way that's best for Natsu, because Natsu usually trains by himself. And when I was talking earlier about kind of like special, like there's generally a difference between just training and specialized training. And an example for this, anybody who's seen or read Mashal, there is a part near the end where it kind of goes over how he's able to, like, I won't go too much into spoilers for anybody who plans on reading it or was waiting for later seasons, but there's an explanation of the difference of training when you just work out kind of muscles at random almost, and just kind of work out with the idea of working out, and then working out in specialization to kind of like, oh well, this is, you can just work out your muscles by lifting up heavy stuff and moving around, but if you do it in this way, you're going to be getting the optimal amount of just general workout and percentage and muscle gain. And on top of that, you're going to be able to cycle through each muscle in order to make it so they're able to gain, like, just get stronger, rebuild back themselves, and to gain the most optimal amount of progress. And I think with Natsu, there could be that with him training with other Dragon Slayers. I really like the idea of having some form of time skip with him and the members of Diablos. I think it'd be really cool if it's like, whatever, let's just say a year later, and Natsu has been essentially going through a gauntlet fighting each member of Diablos constantly. So he's just fighting people with varied movesets, varied styles, but ultimately is a Dragon Slayer, so where they're going to be coming at him like a dragon, mostly melee attacks, attacking him directly, other people who are tanks, because he, like, I've talked about this a little bit, I should do a video on it sometime, but Natsu is one of the best for talking about like character versus character because of how varied his opponents have been. For instance, you have somebody like Ichigo. Most of the people Ichigo fights are swords people. I'm trying to think of most of the people Asta fights are ranged casters. Natsu has fought a very large variety from, casters, one trick dangerous hacks people, direct melee people, swords people, a complete myriad of elements. He has just a very widespread catalog of varied opponents, but he always ends up getting pushed the most when he's fighting other Dragon Slayers, because he's fighting people that are able to physically output levels of damage but also take a lot of damage, because generally the biggest thing about a Dragon Slayer is their durability, because they have a dragon-like body. So him having people more like him in order to train, I think, would yield the highest results. And on top of that, you'd be, again, fighting other dragons. So it would probably give you more of an instinctual level to drive and combat if you are fighting people similar to you in output, capabilities, presence. Like, if, like, say they introduced something like it's almost like a hyperbolic time chamber, but not really. Maybe it's not like, oh yeah, you get more time, but it's like, oh yeah, certain effects will be undone afterwards. Like, maybe say Misaki has a dimension. That's a perfect example. Misaki has a dimension where she's like, oh, in this dimension, you essentially could borderline kill somebody else, but the second you come out of the dimension, all the damage is gone. But you maintain the amount of progress, but you also maintain the level of like stuff like stress and fatigue. So it's like, say you outdid all, put all of your energy, you're dead tired afterwards, you're barely holding on, you're about to bleed out. You come out of the dimension, you're still tired, you still feel exhausted, but all the wounds are gone. And that would be really useful because you could have each of the Dragon Eaters use their Dragon Force and gain those power-ups and general advantages. And then by the end of it, come out of the dimension, they go back to normal. I think that would be really cool, and it would make a lot of sense for the members of Diablos as well. Because one of the things about their Dragon Force that is confusing to me, and I'm sure that there's like it's one of those things maybe like you just know as a Dragon Slayer, is how would you know that you can activate your Dragon Force if it's a potential no going back thing? And for instance, Seven Deadly Sins has a similar power up for the Endura, but like you have to be over a certain power level, and there's a specific method to doing it, but there's a specific method to doing it. So once you meet those thresholds of this general strength, and I can't remember if there's a heart requirement. I know you have to give up your hearts, I think. So I assume there's like, you have to have, I think it's like, what, 6 out of 7 or something like that. I don't remember exact number before anyone corrects me. But it's like, as long as you have those two things met, then it makes sense of like, oh yeah, you just be able to do it because you know that is what you only have to require for it. There's no extra thing. But for Dragon Force, like, how would you know that you could do it without actually testing it out and getting a feel on it? So I would really, really hope that we get one more time skip. Maybe not as much as like a full 5 years. I think another year, maybe like a year and a half or something, would be really cool. Because I think we need one where it is set to the characters not being forced, not something like Sirius Island, going after Tartaros where they're all spread, or after Alvarez where it was more like a calm kind of just span of time passing. I think it'd be really cool if all the characters were like, listen, we need to do this, we'll meet up later, but we have to do this right now, and we have to kind of get separated, but in the end we'll be back. Because I think that there's just general different types of time skips and training arcs, and Mishima has done different ones throughout the series. Like, a lot of people don't, like, the first one is a really good example because a lot of people wonder, it's like, well, what's the point of a time skip if the characters didn't get stronger? But the whole point is it's about time lost, not about character progression in terms of strength. So if we got something where it's like, all right guys, we have to put in the time, I know this is going to be hard, but this is something we need to do, I think that would be really cool. But it's done on like agreed terms, and the characters are fighting and doing all their stuff while thinking about each other and getting ready to eventually get back together and get ready for like the next big battle that they all are getting the drive for it. And then I think it'd be really cool too if like Lucy had one that's like, and she's doing stuff in the celestial spirit realm where it's maybe reversed. Instead of it feeling like a short amount of time, it's longer for her, so she's able to make up more ground. But she only has like it's only a perception of time thing. Maybe she does, it's not like she ages faster, but it feels like it, like 100 years of experience, but it's only felt like a year or something, kind of like that. I think that'd be really cool. But anyway, other than that, tell me your thoughts are about this and what you would think about another time skip, especially one that would yield into the characters all reaching their theoretical peaks, and to see what exactly they could all accomplish from it. I think that would be really cool, because each of them, I think, could also just do little bits of world building and a little bit of like character exploration. And at this point, there's not a lot of just like secret reveals that a lot of characters can have. It's more about seeing their reactions and responses as to events. And I think all of them having like a bit where they have to separate and do something like a specialized training arc for each of them would be really cool, is to see their reactions to each thing, how each of them processes it, and to see what, excuse me, I'm finishing a video, bud, and to see exactly what their general mindset is going to be around what's driving them, what keeps them going, how are they each going to handle the fact that they know that all the other members of the cast are out doing stuff, and maybe that's what's going to keep them all going. Because it's like, I would really love to see like a joint part where all of them are at like a really hard pressure point, but they're like, I know that everybody else is probably dealing with their own like hardships and they're pushing through, so I can't let this hold me back. I think that would be awesome. But anyway, other than that, comment below, tell me your thoughts are about all this, and I'd really like to see how this all plays out. We'll see kind of like where the tempo of things is going to be going to once we kind of move into Ignea's arc, because maybe we don't move right into it in once we get back to the story. He's just getting hyped up after seeing all these cats. But I think we would at least be able to kind of get an idea of where we're going to be going into once we get back to things. Even if it's going to be more setup, maybe we have to go find out a little bit about the Fire God's castle, and to see what is going to be looming over the horizon. But anyway, other than that, like I said, comment below, thumbs up the video, for the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But other than that, I appreciate everybody's already subscribed, and I hope my dog isn't going to freak out again before this is done. Bye.